Ahsoka, Balance of Truth, Book 1, Chapter 37. Yes, my lord, the asset is within the stronghold, Side said with a dignified pose. And of your agent within the fortress, my lord? She has carried out her task in full devotion to the Empire, Captain. Carry out the task and return your fleet to the Ilum system. My lord, Side said with a low, sweeping bow. Your priorities are now made clear, Captain, the full-bodied image of the Emperor said and ended the transmission on his side. Captain Side huffed in mild exasperation as he leaned over his holotable and disconnected his transmission. He knew he could still complete the mission, if full, and given the opportunity, but his Emperor was clear. He brought a hand to his chin and thought for a moment before turning completely and walking from the small room and back into his command deck. Bev, make sure we're patched into the TAC net, he said with a crisp priority. All yours, sir. Listen up. Our directive has changed from extraction to extermination. Hung, Kaj, back up to your respective positions. Group 3, turn prone planet side and prepare for orbital bombardment. On my mark. Reference 29.2, 1 by 99.79. Sir? Pritkar spoke up immediately. I know, Kirkland, Side returned. Sir, none of us would question orders, but his fortress? Pritkar said timidly. You have your orders. We all do, Side commented stoically. Ahsoka could feel the spine, twisted and broken, within her grasp and knew the target was already dead. Feeling and sensing Kawani spin around, she released her grasp on the second target and focused solely on Barriss before her. She ignited her saber before adopting a more solid stance. Feeling Kawani roll away from her footing after loosing the blaster bolts, she finished the second target. She knew it was just her and Barriss. You know this doesn't end well for you, Ahsoka said, feeling the truth of every word. She saw Barriss analyzing her, looking for weaknesses as she narrowed her yellowing eyes. Ahsoka almost let a laugh escape her lips. Banter is pointless, Barriss, as will be your death. There is another way. Ahsoka tried for reason. Barriss had expected the approach. No, Ahsoka, there is no other way. You don't understand now, nor will you ever. Ahsoka had in turn expected as much, but would avoid any more bloodshed if she could. There was a time when I would have, she admitted openly, crossing her feet over one another to bring herself closer. Barriss had waited long enough and had retrieved and ignited twin crimson sabers in either hand faster than Ahsoka thought possible, bathing her olive face in a reddish glow. Ahsoka raised her saber before her, both hands on the hilt, and continued her advance. You have no idea what you're up against, Ahsoka, and you're running out of time, Barriss said, crouching low and coiling her form around her feet and ankles. A low rumbling shook the fortress's foundations around them, but neither combatant responded with notice. Tapping her helmet, Kawani looked up and tagged the targeting attachment. Ahsoka, Star Destroyer pushing up the well, she said as casually as she could. You see, Barriss, you are nothing to them. To him. They leave you here to die. Ahsoka said, her eyes locked on Barriss's, attempting another plea for reason. Kawani looked at Barriss, focused as deeply as she could through the helmet visor. She's already glazed over in subjugation, Ahsoka. She's decided her fate. Barriss didn't even bother with a retort as she leaped with ferocity at Ahsoka, extending the twin sabers before her as she spun toward her target. Ahsoka was momentarily taken aback, having never seen a combative move like the one employed by Barriss. From a defensive standpoint, there was little to do, and she had only a fraction of a second to execute a roll to her left, taking her out of the arrowhead path the approaching sabers had presented. She felt her legs ache from the effort, from her right knee buckle awkwardly as she sprung back up to her feet, and a slight tweak in her lower back. I'm getting too old for this, she thought, then just as quickly scolded herself for her lack of attention. The repositioning of both Barriss and Ahsoka presented a clean shot to Kawani, and she took full advantage, unloading both Westars. Barriss adeptly dodged the first three and redirected the fourth up into the ceiling high above, and Ahsoka made full use of the misdirected attention. Use the saber, perhaps? Tsar asked quickly. Kawani stifled a laugh despite the situation. I'm more than likely to kill myself with that thing. No, Tsar, I'm much better off with the blasters. After recovering from the roll, Ahsoka sprung up again right back into her previous position. Why betray one master just to answer to another, Barriss? She said, making a play to penetrate the former Padawan's mental defenses. There will always be a choice. You can make a good one here and now. Kawani didn't see the sense in even talking, but then she didn't possess the past these two did. Her eyes were on the others in the chamber, and she was continually looking for opportunities to strike that would aid and not hinder what Ahsoka was doing. Barriss swiftly executed an uppercut strike that would have mortally wounded us most. Ahsoka had sidestepped the blow and redirected Barriss's blade with a flick of her wrist. She looked deep into Barriss's eyes as their bodies ended the feint in close proximity. She saw hatred, a burning internal rage that she was desperately trying to channel into her actions. Ahsoka could sense her frustration and how deeply that feeling bled. End this nonsense, Barriss. There is still time, she said, blocking both of Barriss's advancing blades with simple wrist movements, keeping her elbows close to her torso. Why die when you choose to live? Phrased as a statement. Ahsoka tried pleading to the old Padawan within, sensing her presence. Again, Barriss attempted the uppercut maneuver, which Ahsoka cast aside. Barriss stumbled over herself, exerting the effort, but recovered quickly. Kawani saw the stumble and fired again, glancing volleys aimed at the Durasteel paneling at Barriss's feet, forcing her foe to overextend herself to prevent the redirected bolts from smashing into ankles. Ahsoka took that moment to twirl her blade in her hand, loosening up her wrist before Barriss unleashed a twirling over-under attack that forced Ahsoka to flip her body into a horizontal spin, avoiding both blades and finishing with a foot and knee on the ground. Barriss immediately laced into ferocious short strikes, her blades a blur of crimson arcs. Ahsoka bounced the blades with her saber as the fulcrum between them kept her wrist low and channeled as much force energy into maintaining her strength there as she could, with each deflection redirected upward and out. Instead of considering a change of tactic, Barriss continued the barrage. Ahsoka, sensing the foolishness of the endeavor, pulled in a quick influx of force energy and put all her focus into pushing Barriss back. A silent shock ripped through the chamber as Ahsoka extended her arm and released a burst of energy, forcing her opponent back 4 meters. Barriss, already recovering from the force push, glanced at Kawani and saw the blaster rifle emerging from over her shoulder, knowing the woman wouldn't fire, risking deflection. Ahsoka took a brief respite to walk in a slow circle, purposefully twisting her feet in her boots to keep her body loose. Do you not see how foolish this is, Barriss? How do you think this is going to end? She said, taking her eyes off Barriss momentarily and clearing her mind. You never took the time to develop your saber skills, Barriss. There is only one that could have taught you since. Think, Barriss. Unduly held me back, Ahsoka, Barriss said, taking the time to catch her breath. Too arrogant to listen. I wasn't referring to Master Unduli, Barriss, emphasizing the title Barriss had neglected. You seem to have inherited arrogance from someone, though. Barriss shot forth a cutting laugh. I did get my say, rest assured. The words were laced with venom. Ahsoka's sure now that Barriss was, at the very least, present during Luminara's execution. Barriss glanced again at Kawani and held the stare longer than anticipated. Kawani sensed a change in tactics, concentrated on the force energies being manipulated through the room, paying close attention to both Barriss and Ahsoka. Ahsoka, for her part, had remained unchanged. A steady flow of force energies into and out of her, giving what she was receiving. Barriss, on the other hand, was letting nothing go, only building the energies within herself. She loved you, Barriss, like a daughter and a sister, but you've been unfaithful in the past, disloyal. Kawani is right to take insult with your markings, Ahsoka said, working to regain the fallen Miri Allen's attention. Is that what this is, then? Why do you resist your urge to run away from your Emperor? Show the galaxy you can be trustworthy? Ahsoka scoffed, the notion ludicrous enough that it may be the truth. Aware of the rumbles felt throughout the fortress again, where does that trust get you? She was cutting deep, she knew, but Barriss would not take her eyes off Kawani. Kawani was certain now that the tactics had shifted, as she felt a slight burning inside her skull. The Miri Allen maintained unblinking eye contact. Ahsoka sensed something had changed as she was beginning to get frustrated in her unsuccessful efforts to regain Barriss's attention. She had not moved a muscle, but neither had Kawani. She knew she should close the distance between herself and her friend and tried to relocate, but she found her feet would not move from the duranium flooring. A tinge of burning within Kawani's head was becoming a painful conflagration, unrealistic thoughts of her insides being slagged like the mantis swirling in the haze between consciousness and subconscious. Thoughts of subcellular flames destroying her from the inside out as they amassed into an explosion of flesh and bones. She thought she needed to put the fire out, scratch the flesh from her to get at them. Maintain lucidity, relax your conscious mind, and fall back to subconscious action. Appeal to rationality. State, if you must, where reason begins and ends. The raspy voice of an ages-old sergeant, Tom's to be precise, began whispering in her ear. What the hell was that? Tsar dared a whisper of his own. Kawani said nothing, but felt the flames die down immediately. Orders, she roared, and she pulled the trigger on the A-180 repeatedly. Each blast should have ended her life, but Barriss deflected each as they came straight for her upper chest. There was no time to redirect the bolts. Ahsoka's friend had the weapon set to full charge. She was lucky even to deflect them, the force of which was pushing her backward and breaking the concentration she needed to finalize the incantation. Focus, Barriss told herself. Remember your training. Kawani knew she was being subjected to intense suggestion and nothing else. However, the power behind the sorcery was intense, focused, and precise. Her mind kept relating to her that the pain was real, genuine. She glanced at Ahsoka, who had adopted a confused and helpless expression, struggling to move. It seemed as if she was tugging at her legs. Kawani offered the thought that struck her. Leave me, Tsar. Fulfill this illusion and go to Ahsoka. This Barriss is lost and cannot be saved. But, Tsar began, don't argue, just go, she thought as the pain began to intensify. Ahsoka, dumbfounded momentarily by the mental assault, struggled more with the thought of being immobilized rather than the reality of it. When she saw Kawani drop to her knees, the blaster rifle clattering to the ground, bellowing an anguished scream that made her blood curdle. The cry, coming through the helmet modulator, echoed throughout the chamber, resonating deep within her chest and piercing her broken mantra in a head-splitting, high-pitched ringing. Her own eyes wincing from both the pain and anticipated grief for her friend, she wasn't immediately aware of the presence within her. Ahsoka, Tsar said softly, trying not to confuse her. She told me to come to you. Her pain is real, but not as a result of anything this Barriss is doing. We need to use this distraction wisely. Ahsoka, startled beyond definition, vaguely understood what had just happened and was already working on a plan. Remember what this place is, Ahsoka, Tsar whispered. Use it. Ahsoka had forgotten the discussion upon flying past the structure earlier, but their present reality and the reminder snapped her attention completely toward the truth of it. With Barriss's attention almost utterly upon Kawani, Ahsoka had her window of opportunity and began to accumulate the Force energy around her, focusing deep, seeing in her mind the depth of the structure, going beyond its foundation and through it the iris, built into the inverted pyramid deep below the surface that provided a focal point for the ley lines of energy flowing through the planet itself and routed that energy directly into her. She then focused on the upper channel of the structure that served to draw upon the cosmic force energies, especially the flows of power to the planet from the galactic chain of currents, and pulled those within her as well. Ahsoka could feel an intense warmth centering in her midsection and felt her feet break free of the sorcery holding them in place. Kawani's scream subsided in her mind as her focus intensified, the warmth becoming a fire ready to consume her enemy. Kawani had no train of thought. The pain from Zar's exit brought her to her knees as she fought to overcome its effects, groaning through gritting teeth and soaking tears escaping tightly closed eyes. You have failed, Thana, she managed with a sharp rasp of barely distinguishable basic. Hearing her words echo back, she brought her left knee up and planted her foot on the floor. You have failed, she repeated, more clearly this time, firing her right arm forward to support the action of bringing her other foot to rest on the floor and standing up, snatching the rifle at her feet in the process. Only then, at those words, did Barriss finally see the branding on Kawani's left forearm, and her eyes lost their intense fire as she couldn't hide her surprised expression. This could not be possible. KT 306? Kawani said with ringing clarity. The designation should jar your memory. It did, resoundingly. Only a handful of adepts assigned to Kino had mastered the effects of force suggestion and sorceries. 306 led that group. You were reported lost after the insurgents' attack. This isn't possible. Kawani removed her helmet and cast it to the ground, her eyes fiercely locked on Barriss's. Thana, cravenly denying the name given you, a coward's play. Barriss is your name. Own it. Barriss, traitor to the Republic. Barriss, treasonous Jedi Padawan. I know your stories, both of them. Barriss, still in the throes of shock, heard the words but avoided their bite. She had never thought bringing Ahsoka's before her Emperor an easy task. Still, the addition of this former Sith trooper severely diminished the odds of even her survival. She had played a substantial role in training 306 and her squad, she thought to herself, disrupting her concentration entirely and stirring the feelings and notions of doubt that began consuming her. Despite those doubts and associated fears, she maintained a semblance of mental capacity. If you're here, then KS 237 is not far. Kawani adopted a thin smile that spread from ear to ear. The Thespescan never is. It seems your memory is still intact. Barriss immediately brought her wrist up to her mouth. Captain, she bellowed. Static was her only response. Please consider a like and sub. It is YouTube's way of getting these to more people. I am less concerned with subs as I am with getting the story out there, and I need your help to do that. Thank you.